Evening and welcome to Ducks in a Row, Advanced Directives for Healthcare. We're going to go ahead and get started. People's Memorial Association would like to acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Coast Salish, Duwamish, and Suquamish nations on which we work and live. We have about 145 people, I believe, signed up tonight. So just to cut down on the background noise, we're going to go ahead and keep all of our attendees on mute tonight. Don't worry about scrambling to get all your notes down. We're going to be recording, so you'll be able to refer back to this recording later on, and hopefully that'll help you kind of stay focused on what our presenters are telling you all about. We imagine you're going to have a lot of questions, and that is totally normal. Please feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A feature to submit those. If you're a little on the shy side, you're welcome to directly message me your question, and I promise to keep your identity a secret. I know for a lot of times this can be like, or a lot of people, this can be like drinking from a fire hose. So if you need a little time to sort of metabolize the information we're going to share with you tonight, we'll make sure you have contact information for us at People's Memorial, as well as our presenters, so you can follow up with them once you've kind of teased out what your question is. If this is your first time attending one of our sessions, welcome. We're so happy to have you. My name's Beverly, and I'm the Communications Manager for People's Memorial Association. We're the oldest and largest memorial society in the U.S., founded way back in 1939, right here in Seattle. We provide funeral education and advocacy services to all Washingtonians, but if you're joining us from a little further afield, or maybe you have family in other parts of the country, fear not. There's about 65 other organizations doing very similar work under the umbrella of the National Funeral Consumers Alliance. So distinctly possible there's a similar org a little closer to home that might be able to help support you. Over 217,000 folks have become members of People's Memorial, and of those folks, about 71,000 of them are currently living, so we stay very busy in our office. And in terms of how we serve the community, one of the biggest things we do is education. We offer free classes like this and just a real bevy of resources hosted on our website and our Instagram and our Facebook. And if I could ever figure out how to use Twitter, hopefully there too. In addition to that education, we work really hard to support our state level legislature in increasing funeral choice, increasing price transparency in a notoriously opaque industry, the funeral industry, and also working to protect cultural rights. We're really blessed here in Washington to have an incredible diversity of ethnicities and religions and spiritual practices, and we firmly believe that all people deserve access, equal access actually, to affordable cremation, burial, alkaline hydrolysis, and natural organic reduction, as well as all the meaningful spiritual practices that go along with those. So we're just so pleased that you've chosen to join us here at 5 o'clock on a day where it doesn't even seem to be raining. It's a real treat to get to share this information with you. And in case you didn't know, this is actually part of a series. This 3-session series is going to be completely free and open to the public. We've got one next week on funeral options and then the following week on estate planning. So we hope to see you at one of those other sessions. Thank you so much to Pam Hunter. She is here from the KCLS Glacier region. She's a teen and adult services librarian, and King County Library System is actually hosting our session today. Hey there, Pam. Do you have any updates for patrons that might be attending?
I do. I did want to tell you a little bit about some changes that have come about within the last couple of weeks, and some that will be coming up in a few weeks as well. For one thing, if you do need to go to our website, that's kcls.org, and there's a calendar link on that page that'll give you information about the various programs that we have, mostly online, but that's one of the changes that's going to be happening here, is beginning in April, we're going to be having in-building programming again.
Oh.
That doesn't mean that we're not going to have the online programming anymore, because some of that has been so popular that we're going to continue to do that as well. And most of our buildings about 2 weeks ago added an extra day. So now we're open 6 days. Most libraries are open 6 days a week instead of the 5 that we were during the end of the pandemic. And then also the mask mandate is going to be changing for us. So March 12th will mean that if people want to wear a mask in the library, they certainly will be able to do that and encouraged to do that if they'd like to. But if they do not want to, that will not be required anymore. So those are sort of some of the quick changes that are going to be happening here soon. And I just want to thank you all for coming and thank Beverly for giving us this opportunity to partner with People's Memorial. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pam.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know you guys didn't all show up here to hear me and Pam talk about our organizations. You're really here so you can get all of the important questions that you've got lingering answered about advanced care planning. So today we've got Kelly Sanderbeck and we've got Ann Arntson here as well from End of Life Washington. They're both volunteers and they are going to give us some really good baseline information to help us as we plan and navigate and talk to our family about our wishes. Welcome, Ann and Kelly.
Well, thank you so much, Beverly and Pam, for laying the groundwork, and a little bit of chuckling on my part, thinking that there probably were about 927 other things that you could have been doing this evening, and yet it's 5 p.m. on a random Tuesday, and you're logged in to hear about advanced planning and advanced healthcare directives and so on. So, yay for you! So I'm Ann Arntson, and elsewhere on the screen, you'll see Kelly, and I'll turn it over to her in a second, but I'm going to be one of the presenters this evening from End of Life Washington. We'll tell you a little bit about the organization and then present our stuff. I come to you in two different roles, really, but from End of Life Washington as an ambassador for the organization, and also as what is called a volunteer client advisor, which is someone who, as a volunteer, works one-on-one with people interested in investigating end-of-life options, just getting some information and so on and so forth. So I came to death and dying in sort of a circuitous route. I'm a meditation, yoga, mindfulness teacher and study different, spiritual things. And it's really hard not to, as you become aware of the importance of living in the moment and living mindfully, it's hard not to get kind of this tug of figuring out how to die mindfully also. And I think it's in that capacity really that I started to do this work. I got exposed to death and dying at an early age. My dad was 37 years old when he died in his sleep on his 37th birthday. And so it sort of created this feeling of fragility, so to speak, to life. And then I got roped in the comfort of life itself, and I stopped sort of remembering it was going to happen to me. But you know what the number one cause of death is? It is living. And so might as well plan a little bit, right? So that's my background. I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, and I'll circle back around in a little bit. You're muted still, Kelly.
Thanks. So as she said, as Ann said, my name is Kelly, and I recently retired. I've been volunteering with hospice for about the last 6 years, and I'm also starting to train to be a death doula. But I also wanted to take my time to work with End of Life Washington, especially to make presentations like this, so we can all get the conversation started a little more. I think I first acknowledged death in the 80s. I was living in New York City, and I had a lot of young gay male friends, and a lot of them started dying. But I think it really became personal for me after my dad died, because even though we tried for years, he would never have a discussion about what he wanted. So when the time came, we had to make some decisions for him, not knowing if they were what he really wanted, which still holds with me today. And so after that, I was determined that I wouldn't let my children have to wonder about what I'd want. And I wanted to educate others about their options and again, get the conversation started. I think if we talk more about death, it becomes a more normal part of life and becomes a little less scary. So now when I tell my boys what I want, they take it in, but not that seriously because they are still in their 20s and immortal. But when I say that, oh, well, I might change my mind over time, the first thing they say is, what do you mean? We have to keep talking about this? And I say, of course, that's the whole point. Okay, so Ann's going to take over from here, and then I will swing back around in the second half.
Unmute myself. And pardon me while I fumble a little bit with the Just getting to share some of my screens. So here we go. There we go. So hopefully, Beverly, you want to give me a thumbs up? We're good. All right. Welcome to our end of life ready presentation, you guys. And Kelly and I were just saying that we're sad we're not seeing all of your faces on the screen, but I know you're there, and so welcome for carving this time out. So Anne and Kelly this evening talking to you about advanced directive and end of life options. And before we jump in, I just was hoping we'd take just a brief moment to arrive in what I do with my students when I teach yoga and mindfulness, which is to take a moment to drop into our bodies, to not get into our heads right away about what we're going to hear and the questions we might ask, but just to acknowledge this precious moment that we have right now, which is really the only one we're ever guaranteed, right? This here and now, by feeling our bodies, feel your body just sitting or lying down or standing, whatever you're doing. Whatever point of contact you have between your body and the ground or proxy to the ground, feel that. Notice if there's any tension in your face, in your shoulders. It's amazing how those shoulders tend to live by our ears. Maybe take a moment to soften them a little bit, relax them. And then just for a brief moment, just notice that you're breathing. When's the last time you've paid attention to that, right? Just notice your breath, and this one as it comes in, and as it goes out. And then I'll share a favorite poem from Ellen Bass called If You Knew, which I think speaks to what we're about to tackle this evening. She says, what if you knew you'd be the last to touch someone if you were taking tickets, for example, at the theater, tearing them, giving back the ragged stubs? You might take care to touch that palm, brush your fingertips along the lifeline's crease. When a man pulls his wheeled suitcase too slowly through the airport, when the car in front of me doesn't signal, when the clerk at the pharmacy won't say thank you, I don't remember they're going to die. A friend told me she'd been with her aunt, they had just had lunch, and the waiter, a young gay man with plum black eyes, joked as he served the coffee, kissed her aunt's powdered cheek when they left. Then they walked half a block and her aunt dropped dead on the sidewalk. How close does the dragon spume have to come? How wide does the crack in heaven have to split? What would people look like if we could see them as they are, soaked in honey, stung and swollen, reckless, pinned against time? Whoa. So here we are, End of Life Washington, and Kelly and I are volunteers with this organization. And essentially, it's an organization primarily fueled by volunteers like the two of us. They have a permanent staff, but quite a few of us also doing the work. We provide, as the People Memorial do, education, free education and resources through presentations like this one on our website, and also through consultations and partnerships. Through consultations, we provide one-on-one support to individuals who are interested in finding out about end-of-life planning and end-of-life options. And we have over 70 volunteers, such as myself and Kelly, called VCAs, or volunteer client advisors, who can work one-on-one with folks. We're also deeply engaged in public policy and advocacy, and you may not know this, but End of Life Washington was instrumental in passing the 2008 Death with Dignity law, 2008, yeah. And also we are providing additional support and documents in terms of early stage dementia called My Instruction for All Feeding and Drinking. And we'll talk about some of those things a little bit later on in the presentation. So Kayla and I are going to talk to you about planning ahead. You'll have a chance to ask questions, as Beverly said, and I'm hoping that you're sitting comfortably and that you listen. As Beverly said, you don't need to madly scramble and take notes. Not only will Beverly be sending you some additional stuff in the recording of this session, but we'll also be providing additional stuff from End of Life Washington also. So just relax and take it in, trusting you'll retain whatever you need to know right now. For the sake of expediency also, we're going to be taking those questions you might have in the chat box. So as things come up, perhaps just just write it down. Beverly will be monitoring it. And if we don't get to all the questions before it's time to be done, just trust that we'll just make a note of everything, and the follow-up emails and stuff will address all of those things. So if you have a problem hearing me or Kelly, if anything happens technically, feel free to reach out via the chat. Also, we'll do the best we can to monitor. All right. So talking about end of life, it is tough to talk about death. Some people don't even like to talk about death or use the word. I actually, in the work that I do, I'm also a hospice volunteer as well as a End of Life Washington volunteer. I can't tell you the number of times I see someone not using the word death or the word dying. Mostly I hear past seems to be a favorite. People whisper or change the subject. It's understandable and uncomfortable. It's also probably related to, culture. In our country, we don't do death very well. And it's hard to have conversations about death and dying, especially with the people who care about you and the people about whom you care. It's also hard to have these conversations with your healthcare providers. Their job is to make you feel better. And yet here you are, just wanting and needing to talk about death and dying and your end of life wishes. So it makes these conversations challenging to have. And yet, not planning and not having some things laid out equates, a choice that we make. And essentially is that we're going to let other people make some decisions on our behalf were we not able to do those. And so there's something, to be said about planning ahead. So this is why we've created this presentation, to make it easier for you to navigate and to be able to have these conversations with everyone in your life and everyone involved in your care. So this is probably a critical component, which is not very often talked about, but the first step in planning for death and dying and advanced directive would be to actually poke around into what it is that makes life worth living for you. So we'll start with life and living, and completing a values worksheet is a great way to start. It's available on our website as well as online on many other organizations' websites. And this values worksheet is not about specific diseases or symptoms, but it's rather a reflection on how you feel about life, what's important to you. It helps you to be more clear so that you can actually tell others, right? And should you be physically, incapable of making all the decisions on your behalf, it just invites reflection, and it's inviting you to think about what's important to you so you can pass it on and rate it so that the people speaking on your behalf would be aware of what you want and need. Some of the things that are in that worksheet are such things as being independent and living independently. How important is this to you? What does living well mean to you? How you are able to relate to your family and your friends. Being free of physical limitations, things such as living in a care facility. Under what circumstances would you care to perhaps have hospice care, and would you want it at home, or would you want it, in a hospital? Essentially, this helps to have clear conversations with your support team. It allows you to clarify your choices, why they're important to you, and just reduce the fear and the anxiety that might be surrounding expressing your wishes to others. And also, and this is really important, if disagreements arise about some of the choices that you want to lay out, being clear about what you want actually helps to communicate this to those folks who might disagree with you. So the most important step in being end of life ready, or have your ducks in a row, or I love this organization called Good to Go, like our highway thing in Washington, but that's what it's called. So the most important thing in being end of life ready is to choose your team, to choose your support team. Your care providers, your healthcare agent, the folks that you trust will be there to reflect your needs and to communicate on your behalf should you be ill or injured. They become the facilitators, the resources who will help honor your wishes in your final days, And you need to make sure that once you understand what it is that you want, that they understand and that they're able to carry those wishes. Some end-of-life options are actually not supported by all organizations, something we'll talk about in a little bit, but just part of your homework will be, as you clarify things for yourself, to make sure that you surround yourself with healthcare organizations and a support team that would actually just carry out your wishes. And as we move through the presentation, we'll walk through the different scenarios, the members of the support team, and then prepare you to hopefully carefully choose such a team. The healthcare agent is the most important person probably that you can pick to support you in your end-of-life planning, essentially. So you need to choose a healthcare agent, and it's also called a durable power of attorney for healthcare. That's probably a term that you have heard before. You're a healthcare agent. In some states, it's also called a surrogate or attorney in fact or proxy. Most people choose their spouse, a partner, a relative, a close friend, someone they trust, could be a member of a faith group, to be their healthcare agent. They can also be professionals. You can hire an attorney. You have to trust this person absolutely to represent you in the event that you would be unable to communicate for yourself, essentially. You have to feel confident that they will be discussing on your behalf all the things that you have outlined, and that they may not agree with you and your wishes, but that they would comply with such wishes. And so some of the things you might be looking for in this person as you look for them would be qualities of groundedness, even-keeled, assertive, someone who lives near you, essentially. There's this funny example of this woman who chose her ex-husband to be her durable power of attorney or healthcare agent. They were separated, but while they were still married, she had a health event, and it just made her realize that her husband was present and fully aware and clear about what it is that she wanted and needed. So when that health condition returned and she needed someone in her life to act as a healthcare agent, she picked him again. So kind of an interesting little story. Once you have picked this person and you want to formalize the relationship, and essentially, we need paperwork and we need signatures and so on and so forth. And so to formalize this thing, you'll have to create a power of attorney for healthcare, or DPOA for HC. There are those initials, right, Beverly? And in this document, you can designate also a secondary power of attorney, which is interesting, just on the off chance you're perhaps moving around, or just maybe more than one person. So a secondary one, and then in case the primary agent is not available. To make the document legal, you have to have 2 witnesses or a notary in the state of Washington. You don't need to have it drawn by a lawyer to make sure that the document is legal. Again, just 2 signatures or a notary. And then to make sure that your healthcare power of attorney or healthcare agent is reachable, just make sure that you have their information on you somewhere. And a good place, now that we all have those devices that we carry with us everywhere, would be to perhaps have that information on your phone under emergency contacts, for instance. So as if it were it, right? You pick this person and then you just sign the paper with the witnesses and you're done. Well, not quite. There's also a paper part of this whole thing, which is called the healthcare directive. So to help your healthcare agent and your care providers understand what you want and what your wishes are, you have to complete this healthcare directive. It's a document that allows you to outline the decisions that you would want made for yourself if you're in a life-threatening situation. I'd like to point out that this is different from the values worksheet. That one was more about the values of life and living. This is different. It allows you to walk through scenarios, essentially, that, just the things that could happen should you be taken to a hospital or an emergency room or handled by medical care professionals. what you would want, depending on the severity of the event. And it addresses things such as hospitalization, intensive care, surgery, artificial ventilation, tube feeding. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but if we don't outline the things we want regarding these events, someone else will make a decision on our behalf, essentially. So your healthcare agent will use this as a guide to make decisions on your behalf, essentially. And then if there are scenarios that you don't see outlined in the healthcare directive, you can also create additional statements that you can attach to this to fluff it out, so to speak. Some people have also done video recordings, so different ways, to craft this support document. If you feel confident that you're pretty clear about everything, what you would want done, you've done some homework, you can do this thing on your own, this healthcare directive. Some people find it helpful to fill it out with their doctor, during one of their appointments, just to make sure they understand the decisions that they would be making. And then also many insurance companies and Medicare will cover advanced planning sessions with your doc. So just next time you're in there, ask your doctor and perhaps just, work on crafting this thing in tandem and as a team. All right, let's take another collective breath, perhaps. I'll just go through this next couple of slides and then turn it over to Kelly. So after choosing a healthcare agent, remember that is the most important thing you can do. You can have all the paperwork in the world, but that person that's going to be in the face of everyone telling them what you want, that assertive, grounded person in your life, really, it's the most important thing. So once you've chosen this person and then you've created your advance directive, then you have the complete advance directive, essentially. It's sometimes called a living will. It's different from a last will and testament, which actually deals with your stuff and how you want it dispersed, essentially. But advance directive or living will is the paperwork, the healthcare directive, and the power of attorney. All adults should create one of those. And we dragged my husband and I, our then 23-year-old daughter, to our attorney's office to do such a thing. As I mentioned, my dad died at 37 in his sleep. He was not anticipating that would be the case. And with a lot of you in this room today, I'm sure many have stories of people that have died early and unexpectedly. So really everyone should have one of those. At End of Life Washington, we've combined both in one single document. So you'll be getting links to all of this stuff. I invite you to look at it, see if it resonates with you. There are many of those documents available online. So the 5 Wishes organization or the Conversation Project, and so on and so forth. The important thing is to research it, and then most importantly, to do it. All right. So just a little summary of this drinking from the fire hose you just received from me. We're trying to cover a lot of stuff today, so bear with me. But once you've completed your healthcare directive, it becomes valid as soon as it has been signed by 2 witnesses or a notary in the state of Washington. Your 2 witnesses, this is important, cannot be related to you by blood or marriage, cannot be your doctors, healthcare team, healthcare providers, or caretakers. They cannot benefit in any way from, your demise. I think it does make a lot of sense, doesn't it? You'll want to share the copies of your advance directive with those around you or part of your care team. It does no good if it's in a safe deposit box somewhere. So make sure that your healthcare agent has it, obviously, but that the folks that are important and around in your life have them as well. And that perhaps you keep a copy of it in the glove box of your car, in your purse, as a little card, saying where it can be located on the off chance it is needed. The latest rendition of it is the valid one. Most recent one, yes. So keep it updated and, don't keep 19 copies of it around. Just make sure that you keep the most recent one. And I think that just about concludes my side of stuff, and I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, who will take you through more stuff.
Okay, I'm going to work to share my screen. All that magic. That good, Beverly? All right. So there are two other directives that you might want to consider adding to your advanced directive. These were created by End of Life Washington because there's definitely a growing rise of dementia and Alzheimer's patients. And we've seen an increase in requests for specifically for memory loss. People want information or ways to plan to manage their fear and possible anxiety over losing their independence or quality of life. As Atul Gawande states in his really amazing book, Being Mortal, I learned a lot of things in medical school, but mortality wasn't one of them. The purpose of medical schooling was to teach how to save lives, not how to tend to their demise. So it's another reason for you possibly to be bringing up the questions with your doc, because a lot of times they're not going to necessarily be the ones bringing it up. So as far as these other directives, there's two that talk about cognitive impairment. And to be clear, this means that when you have full mental capacity, you can draw up these directives to let people know what you would like if then you happen to lose your capacity. The first is the Living with Dementia Mental Health Care Directive. And this gives guidance on how to deal with issues related to loss of memory and your independence, like where you want to live or how you want to be cared for if and when you can no longer remember to or know how to care for yourself. The second is called My Instructions for Oral Feeding and Drinking. Now, this provides information on how to manage nutrition and hydration when you naturally stop showing interests. Now, with Alzheimer's, you might be allowed to die naturally as your body stops requesting to eat or drink. Or if you have something like ALS, and you might want to avoid the fear of choking when swallowing becomes difficult. You do need to know that it is not legal to deny nutrition or hydration if you ask for it. But if you fill out these directives in advance and then you are naturally starting to refuse, that can be allowed. But just know, and I'm sure you know this already, that these issues are so complicated and they require careful discussion and consideration. So if you'd like more details or to be able to discuss these in more depth, you should give End of Life Washington a call. So another thing that might want to be thought about, and this is an addition to an advanced directive, and this is when you are either seriously ill, living with a disease, or perhaps you're over a certain age and you just don't want any more life-sustaining measures. There's a document called a POST, and it's this bright green, or sometimes it's a bright orange, depending on what state you're in. And the POST stands for Physician's Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment. This is a medical order that you actually sign with your doctor, and that tells medical providers and emergency medical providers what kind of life-sustaining treatment you do or do not want, especially if you can't make the decision for yourself. So an example of where this would be used is possibly someone who has cancer. They're receiving comfort measures to manage their pain, but they don't want to extend their life. So a POST allows them to avoid receiving extreme life-saving measures by emergency medical staff if they had a heart attack or they stopped breathing. So that can also be put in place with Alzheimer's patients. For example, if they contract pneumonia and have a POST form, then they wouldn't be given any additional antibiotics, et cetera, to extend their life. These are really helpful when people don't qualify for medical aid in dying, which is the Death with Dignity Act. And for that, you have to have a six-month terminal diagnosis. And there are a lot of degenerative diseases that we are looking at these days, like ALS, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's, that have a much longer term than the 6 months. So people cannot use medical aid in dying. But if you have a POST, then if something happens along the way, that can give EMTs, et cetera, the instructions of how you would like to proceed. I just keep remembering my grandma when she was in her 80s, so she was getting toward the end of her life, and she was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, and something that we never knew talked about beforehand. So we didn't know if she would have wanted that, but she ended up being hooked to all kinds of tubes and wires, and she was hallucinating about donuts and dancing and jewelry, which were her favorite things. I remember stepping out into the hallway with my aunt, and she said, "Oh, she looks good, doesn't she?" Which it just, even I was in my 20s, and it just shocked me, because to me, she was obviously dying, but my aunt couldn't talk about it. And at that point, I wasn't brave enough to bring it up, so I let it go. But I just hope that I would react a little bit differently these days. But getting back to the post, so that's something, if my grandma had filled that out and put it on her refrigerator, then when the EMT showed up, the ambulance showed up, they would not have tried to resuscitate her. That's basically by and large what that means. And it needs to be signed by your doctor, and either by you or your healthcare agent, and put on your door, your refrigerator, or your front of your door, or somewhere where it can be easily seen. So to explain how this all works together, take a look at this illustration. All adults should have an advance directive, and there's two parts to that. There's your healthcare directive, and there's your healthcare agent, or your designated power of attorney. You're never too young or too old to be in a car accident or develop a serious illness quickly, and you might need someone to speak to you. So you're never too young to have an advance directive. And then also, when you're at a point where you don't want any life-sustaining measures taken, a post can be added to that, that's completed with your doctor. And that tells healthcare agents, that tells emergency healthcare folks, excuse me, how you want them to proceed. So again, a quote from Being Mortal. If you can't guess, I think this is a very important book to read. If there's any book I'd read at this point, this is the one I would read for you. Atul Gawande says, "We imagine that we can wait until the doctors tell us that there is nothing more that they can do. But rarely is there nothing more that they can do. Technology has enabled us to stay alive far longer than many people would actually like to if they thought about it. So that's why we're asking people to actually think about it ahead of time." So this is the end of our session for now. I'll stop here, and I'll stop my share, and then Ann and I will take questions, and we'll hear what you have to ask. And Beverly will take over here and be our moderator.
Thank you so much. You both, I knew just were going to blow us out of the water with all this great information. It looks like we've got about 19 minutes, so please don't be shy with your questions. We've got a couple that have come in, so let's go ahead and tackle those. Let's see, where should we start? How about, oh, and just a reminder, we are recording today, so again, don't scramble to take your notes down. We'll make sure we get as much covered as we can. So, do either of you have any hot tips that you could share with folks that, it's easy when you're already on the level and you know about the value of these things, and, you're feeling like you have a greater relationship to your mortality, but that can be a little tricky maybe if you're trying to support someone from a different generation where these subjects might be more taboo. How can you have these questions answered, and how can you have a meaningful talk with someone who might be a little resistant?
One thing that's come up for me, and it's come up recently, and I would say even if it didn't come up for you, you could create a scenario. A friend of mine has stage 4 liver cancer, and he's only in his 60s.
Wow.
So I brought this up with several other people, because I said, okay, if it was me, I'd take my family to Italy for a month and I'd be done. But, everyone you talk to, so, and that's a way to kind of open the door, say, if that was you, what would you want?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes just not pointing it directly, but getting in through the side door can help.
Definitely connecting with current events or, friends and family of going through things. Excellent opening point. We got lots of phone calls after Archbishop Tutu died, and a lot of families had some conversations about acclimation and the greenness of death. What about you, Anne? Any hot tips?
There's actually a website I highly recommend called The Conversation Project. And they basically provide PDF documents and just prompts on how to tackle the conversation initiated in very soft and beautiful ways, both for advanced directive, but also talking about dementia, maybe helping to move someone with Alzheimer's to a care facility, those hard decisions. So just a lot of great pointers on how to initiate the conversation and see where it flows. And I think as a meditation mindfulness teacher, I would say, drop the quarter in the slot and then just do more listening than you do talking, and let that be a process.
I think I really liked how Kelly reminded us that, her young kids who think they're immortal think this is a fixed conversation that's resolved, but this is really kind of a lifelong thing. Your feelings might change, technology might change, and we might not get the results we're looking for in that first conversation, but maybe we've made a little headway, maybe just a tiny bit. Yeah.
In fact, I have my own directives on an app called My Directives. That's because they were very clever that way, I guess. But and once a year or twice a year, I think they send me an email and prompt me to look at things again. Just, is this what you still want? So definitely a changing landscape.
Mm-hmm. There we go. Okay. I'm trying to drop these names into the chat, but don't worry, I'll make sure that I include all these links and books and everything that we're mentioning, so that way you can kind of check them out on your own and see if anything helps you out. I love the idea of having an app on your phone. That's a great one. Let's see. Okay. We got some feedback from folks. They really appreciate the way that you're talking about this. It's very low stress, and it's kind of helping make this feel like a more approachable project. Let's see. Oh, have either of you tried that tool called, I think Go Wish? It's a deck of cards.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to say, every time I have people over for dinner, they think we're going to talk about death, because I've done that. They have these games that you can play, and one of them is Go Wish, and so it just passes it around the table, and you all have a discussion. So you may have heard things like death cafes, or death with dinner, or death and cupcakes. There are other different organizations doing public projects like that.
Yeah, there's so many great tools. I'll go ahead and share that one. The one I have sitting on my desk is Death Deck, and it's kind of like a trivia game and a good way to kind of start that conversation. But that Go Wish tool can be a great one for folks that might be a little resistant to have an outright conversation, but you have them kind of go through the deck and see things that resonate with them or things that they don't want at all. And you can kind of sort the cards, and it kind of helps visualize it a little bit. So there's some creative options out there. Okay, some folks are curious about getting to access to all these great documents you've mentioned, so I'll make sure these templates to all of the directives are included in the follow-up, as well as the names of these books. This is practically an Atul Gawande book club at this point. We all love his writing. Incredible. So we'll make sure that you have some links to some of our favorite reads in death care to help you. We do have a couple of death care professionals joining us and looking to start doing the kinds of work that you all are doing. Let's see. Are there any unique challenges that either of you see in your work in supporting the folks at end of life who are living with dementia compared to other illnesses or conditions?
Well, the hardest thing I've seen is when they won't discuss it, or even in the early, there's either denial or in the early onset avoidance, etc. So by the time it gets too late to really to change anything. So the hardest is the people taking care of them and their families, because at that point, there's not a whole lot that can be done in the sense of free planning.
I agree, Kelly, and I think we should look at these documents that you mentioned earlier as addendums to the healthcare directive, as those things that we think about them and we hope we never have to use them, but it's like buying insurance, right? You just hope your house is never going to burn down or that earthquake's not going to happen, but we don't know. That's what that poem was speaking to, I think. So, while you're in full possession of your faculties, read this stuff, understand it, see how it resonates. And then if you find that it does, craft something that's good and personal for you, and then just have it there. And hopefully it's in case of emergency break glass and you never have to, but you're not going to leave your decisions up to someone else. And I think also as you're having these discussions with your family, loved one, and people who care about you, sometimes I just, I point out that it's kind of a loving thing to have a plan so that the folks around you don't have to come up with one. There's a lot of relief by saying, hey, I know this is what mom would want, or yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple of questions specific to the post. So that's it's a little bit different, like you guys mentioned with your flow chart, the circumstances under which you would need it might be a little bit different. So is it only valid if you create it or you sign it with a doctor?
Yes, yes.
You can't just do that on your own.
No, right.
Okay.
And you also have to have either a healthcare, situation that warrants such a thing. Sometimes doctors will consider authoring a post with you based on age. So, if you're getting into some later years, 90s or, whatever, depending on what your health condition is, also have that conversation with your doctor. Is it time for me to have a post? And then note to self also, those stainless steel refrigerators, you can't put magnets on them anymore. So
Yeah.
where do we put our post, right?
No, that's a great point. That actually makes me think, since, this is something that has to be done in conjunction with the healthcare provider, what happens if your primary care doctor or your major healthcare person on your team is someone that you're not comfortable with, or you don't trust them, or maybe you get the sense that they're not on the same page about your game plan moving forward? What do you do?
Find a new one.
Yeah. Well, any tips on how to navigate that, or maybe some red flags when you're interacting with those providers, so people know what their rights are?
Mm-hmm.
Conversation.
Well, as far as a post goes, there's really I won't say there's no disagreement, but that's you coming to a medical professional and saying you want to fill out this form. And there's different sections. Like one might say absolutely no treatment, and another might say yes, an antibiotic. So there's different levels of it, but I don't think it's something a doctor could or would deny unless you were 25 and they said, no, I'm sorry, I won't do a post for you or something.
Yeah, it's a fundamental part of their job is to have open, honest, factual conversation with you. If you're not getting that support you're looking for, it's time to get back shopping and find you a new doctor. Goodness. Let's see, what's the next one? Gosh, so many good questions in here. Okay, so if, since it's not a fixed decision, after you get your post form all taken care of, what happens if something needs to be updated or modified later on after that initial document's signed? Can you make changes to it, or do you have to do a totally new form?
For a post, you have to do a new form. Since that is signed with your doctor and dated, you can't update it yourself. Your advanced directives can be updated on your own. Just as Anne said, remember to get rid of the old ones so there's not confusion.
Is it okay to just write in the margins, or, kind of just do sticky notes, or any recommendations on how to make it clear what the most up-to-date stuff is?
Because it has to be signed or notarized, you can't just sticky note it all over the place, essentially. So I would just leave it as is, and then if you have to make changes, then find those two people that signed the first iteration, have them sign the new one, just everything on the, just dot the I's, cross the T's, essentially.
Yeah.
Or it can be two different people even, if it's 10 years later, it can be other people.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. We have some questions about that. Just as a self-promotion thing, just to let you know, I am a Washington State notary, and if you do need some help arranging for that, I know lots of institutions stopped offering it because of COVID. I'll make sure you have my contact information so we can get you notarized and good to go, and the most COVID-safe way possible. So we have some people that are curious about those healthcare agents. So they can't, let's see. Okay, so when we're looking at a living will, does the agent can't be a relative or ex-spouse? Oh, wait, sorry. You can designate an agent that's related to you, but they can't be the witness. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Right, that's an important one. And I definitely am with you guys. Always have a backup plan, because what if that person's on a fabulous safari in Botswana when something happens to you? You want to make sure that we don't have to wait for them to get back in cell service. So for a lot of people, you mentioned that they do tend to lean on their, standard family framework to support them either as witnesses or agents. Do you have any recommendations for people that don't have those types of family structures? Maybe they have no kids or someone they would trust with that stuff?
I've heard of some folks who just go through a faith group, a church perhaps, just people that are, in that circle. You can also work with professionals. I think, death doulas, for instance, or elder concierge can point you in the right direction, and hire, an attorney also to act as healthcare agent also.
Well, that's a great suggestion.
Different ways, yeah.
And that's something that guardianship agencies can potentially help you with. It's certainly one of those things you want to shop around and find a good fit so you know your wishes are going to be honored.
Indeed.
Wow.
Which really I want to circle back to the worksheet from the very beginning, the values worksheet, just how important it is to figure out what it is that you like about life and living will make you more clear about what you want if those things are no longer available to you to, just craft these directives, and then finding the right person also. So it all kind of works together.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, so let's see, what have we got in here next? Do you have any suggestions for broaching these conversations with your family about yourself without accidentally giving them the sense that, you maybe are having some dark thoughts about your health, that you're just, wanting to be planning ahead and not that you're sort of giving up on your wellness or anything? Maybe that might be the assumption from a lot of folks, is if you want to talk about this, that you might be suicidal.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's sad. You know what? My theory is the more you love life, the more you want to kind of have that full cycle, be a part of it. I think about women taking charge of their births in the 70s and how all of a sudden, instead of the doctor telling me everything and giving me drugs or whatever, I get to make my own choices. And I think maybe baby boomers are coming around to that. So it's because you love life so much that you want to have some participation in how your end comes about. That's my philosophy. So,
yeah, I feel like I came across some of this similar sort of pushback from my own friends and family when I did my advanced directives. When I left for my Peace Corps service, they thought, oh, is something wrong? And it's like, no, these are normal things to put some consideration into if you're about to maybe do something a little dangerous. This is absolutely a sign of engagement and planning ahead and thinking of the people you love. Ooh, someone chimed in, it's right. It's a great gift and relief to your loved ones to take that charge. Someone in the chat mentioned that they've actually written their own obituary ahead of time, and that way they can get exactly what they want. I love that idea. That's such a great idea. Someone else said that their grandmother did the same thing. It was wonderful and even enlightening of some things we didn't even know about her.
And for this presentation today, we're really focusing on the power of care of attorney, the advanced directive, the post, but people such as death doulas, for instance, will invite, someone in a family to think beyond that scope, the work of the People's Memorial. How do you want to be buried? What kind of music would you like to have? What kind of legacy project you want to leave, and so on and so forth. And my father-in-law's wife has a binder, which she put together and keeps updated, which has all of her passwords for all of her social media accounts, how she wants all this to be disposed of, or, insurance accounts and investments. And what a gift. Imagine, if something happens to someone you care about and you're handed this binder, this, just this roadmap, so to speak, X marks the spot, and you don't have to figure it out on your own. That's the gift you would be giving others if you go through with this work. So how cool is that?
Yeah, someone messaged us saying less stress, more harmony during a hard time or a crisis. That's so true. Oh, someone's curious. You mentioned an elder concierge. Could you explain a little bit about what that is?
It's someone essentially that can work with people individually and or families who are dealing with just elderly parents or relatives or friends who are needing support in transitioning, perhaps you've lived in your 5,000 square foot house full of all your collections of a lifetime, and all of a sudden you're not able to, live life independently. How do you downsize? What do you do with your things? Healthcare things also with your doctor, estate planning. So they kind of help pull all those things together. I think it's a little bit different from a death doula who is going to work with you perhaps, well, I don't know, actually, maybe more towards the end of life, but a lot of similarities between the two.
It's almost like a project manager for end of life.
Very much.
Ooh, someone's curious, if that sounds like something that you could really use, where do you go to find somebody that does that kind of work?
So the death doula, there are organizations. I did a training a couple years ago with INELDA, which is the International End of Life Doula Association. And I know, Kelly, you're going through another organization.
Which one?
Yeah, I'm doing it. I'm doing it through hospice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. It just made me think it's such a good reminder that there can be a lot of things to clean up, and maybe you need a team to handle it. It might be kind of a bit of a project for one person to run point on all of your end-of-life affairs. So it could be a great opportunity to maybe parse some work out between a couple of loved ones, and not to be shy about bringing in friends and neighbors and maybe even colleagues. I always tell people, even in my own case, I don't have family doing that stuff because I know if I predecease my parents, they're going to have some things on their mind. And so maybe that thing is best handled by a friend. And so I've got some preparations in place. So she gets a cut of my life insurance to go to therapy after she has to handle everything. So, there's no wrong way to do any of this stuff or wrong choices to make. Someone's kind of curious, it seems like we spend so much money and time trying to deal with mitigating all the medical issues at end of life. But once the death happens, there's so little support for folks. Is there anything that exists, a framework that can help support people, after they lose someone they've been supporting, like maybe in the documents, helping guide your friends and family towards resources to help them deal with that loss after the fact?
Well, I know that the hospice organization I work with has grief offerings. They'll have grief support groups, et cetera, et cetera. Or are you talking more nuts and bolts of, a death, that's where a death doula would probably help to bring in all those.
Yeah, I think either of those options is great. And I think that's something that should probably be part of an ongoing discussion if you're in the position to handle any of these things at someone's end of life, to maybe help them prepare for that loss. That's going to be a big one. Oh yeah, someone's curious about posting questions. Yeah, feel free to use the Q&A or chat. I think I can only give us a couple more minutes before we're going to have to sign off. But like I said, you will have contact information for our friends here at End of Life Washington, as well as us at People's Memorial. So if we don't get to you tonight, we will get to you by email. So let's see. Gosh, there's just so much good stuff. Someone recommended there's a kind of like a binder, a do-it-yourself binder on Amazon called I'm Dead, Now What? And I actually have that sitting on my desk. And it's a great little hardback book with all the little forms you can fill out with your passwords and things like that. So there's a lot of good options out here to get yourself organized. No excuses. Everyone's saying, yeah, we've got binders in my family too. This is wonderful. It sounds like lots of folks had a great baseline knowledge coming in. Oh, we love that. Okay, let's see if I can find something really good to end on. See if we can end with a bang here. Okay. So someone says, it sounds like hospice really offers a lot of educational resources and a lot of support at the end. Can you maybe direct us toward any particular organizations, or let us know who it is that you work with, Kelly?
Oh, sure. I work with Volunteer Hospice of Clallam County, which is a really interesting organization because it was only the second in the country. It's been around since '78, I believe. And it doesn't, we don't go with the typical hospice that's part of Medicare. So it's all volunteer funded, which means they don't have to have just 6-month terminal diagnosis. They take dementia patients which is pretty amazing. And they have all these other programs, like we have a lending closet that we lend out medical equipment to the whole county. And they have grief support groups and soul care work, which is one of their newer programs, which we're starting to train death doulas and things like that. So, but there will be a hospice wherever you are. There will be a hospice that you can find that will have resources. So that's what I would say is dig into your area, your local area.
Kind of the advantage of planning ahead, isn't it? You get the chance to do a little comparison shopping.
I've done hospice work also for about 10 years now with Multicare and Franciscans, which is called something else now also. But likewise, not just help with nurses and CNAs and stuff, but all the support also of social workers, chaplains, music and aromatherapy and so on and so forth. So we can't stress enough the importance of being aware of palliative care options, of hospice options. They will not come and kill you in spite of what the popular, image of hospice is. It's actually such a fabulous opportunity to add some life to your days when things are getting tough. So just thinking about this and, making it part of your plan, perhaps.
Yeah. Oh, that's what a beautiful note to end on. Well, we're coming right up at 6:03 here. I know we had a couple of questions I didn't get to, but I promise we'll tackle them in the follow-up email. We've even got people chiming in the chat with their own book recommendations. And so I'll make sure that finds its way into the email to kind of help you in your own research process. Wow, thank you so much for both of you bringing all this delicious expertise and personal experience. It really helps make the subject a little bit easier to swallow. Sometimes it can feel like a big project to document your wishes, but it's never too soon and it's never too much to get the care you need. Well, before we close out, Pam, did you have anything you'd like to close with for the evening?
No, thank you very much for the privilege to, be in community with all of you tonight. And I hope that you just won't stop here and that you'll actually just start to poke around and see what's right if you haven't done it already.
Sure. Oh, everybody's just so excited in the chat saying thank you. Thank you. What about you, Pam? Anything to add?
I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate all this information, and now I'll be able to share a lot more with my patrons and give them some books to read as well as places to go and get more
I thought that might grab your attention, that reading list.
Thank you very much. It was very good. Thank you.
Great.
All right, wonderful.
And I would just say, if you're interested in End of Life Washington has additional presentations on death with dignity and voluntary stop eating and drinking and more hospice and palliative care information. So you can look on our website and find some of those presentations as well.
I'll make sure that link finds its way in there because those are also super important presentations. All right, well, good night, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you at another one of the sessions in our Ducks in a Row series. And while everyone